And then, sure.
In your in-scope list of features, manage, plan, and share with advisor. Will the advisors have the ability to manage the plan on the student's behalf?
They won't in the first year, and then in the second year, what we have proposed is for advisors to be able to create sample plans that a student could then take. And something we'd need to figure out with requirements is it appropriate ever for an advisor to take control of that plan to the point where a student can't then adjust it themselves? You know, is this the student's information or is this owned by the advisor? And what are the scenarios where it's really critical for an advisor to essentially dictate that plan? And so there's kind of some open questions there around how do we handle, and we're kind of calling them sample plans, but they're essentially advisor-generated plans. And we've heard a lot of interest both from undergraduate and graduate, but I think the graduate school most loudly has been calling for it in having where graduate advisors a lot of times will actually dictate, here's the course set.
Yeah, I think, you know, when we originally did the requirements around Learning Plan, we definitely had a requirement that an advisor should be able to edit a student's plan, and you know, potentially a student could be able to reject or accept those changes. But we didn't, you know, at least on the business side, we hadn't thought all the way through, you know, who owns the record, who owns the plan. Does this apply equilaterally to all students and all programs? Is it just specific programs? Like anytime you get into this kind of thing, once you get into the real details of the authorization, it gets pretty sticky. So I think there's always been this idea of having ability for advisors to quote-unquote manage a student's plan, but exactly what that means, you know, I don't think we didn't get to the point where it was actually buildable. So I think you're just running into those specific issues of trying to take this generic idea of managing a plan on a student's behalf, and what does that actually look like? And yeah.
So for you, go ahead.
So the only other thing I would quickly add is that at least here at IU, we have circumstances that would indicate both cases, and probably shades of gray in between, meaning that sometimes you really want only the student to manage their plan. There are other programs, other majors, if you think of it that way, in which the advisor has complete control over what the student is going to be allowed to take.
So I have a question along those same lines about the advisor-student relationship. So to use your use case where the student is looking for a chem course, they search for it on Google, they arrive at the MyPlan chem course page, they log in, they add it to their plan, they send it to their advisor. How does it know which advisor to send it to? What's the plan for the? Are you going to be integrating with Kuali? Is Kuali going to be managing that relationship, or how's that going to work?
So we're looking to integrate with Kim for the identity management, and at the University of Washington, Kim then integrates with we call it Astra, but it's a role-based management program. So depending on how the university, you know, each university wants to manage that, they would just need to make sure that they've got an integration between Kim, the Kuali identity management, and whatever your role-based system would be. We're working through scenarios just because support for role-based access can be costly, not just to set up, but over time where you've got phone calls in about, you know, why am I not able to see this plan? To both be looking at how can we make sure it's really clear to whomever who's trying to see a plan why they can't and what they would need to do in order to get access. But then also trying to see what do we really need to be able to, what sort of complexity is really required versus possible.
Yeah, and Kathy, I think services are on, and she might be able to say a couple of words about, I know right now Kim does not support person-to-person relationships, but that's part of the enhancements. So there's a couple of different ways to tackle the, I think, the advisor to student role. You know, one is through programs. If the student's in a program and you have an advisor's relationship to a program, ergo, you've got, you know, through the program, one relationship, but I do know that it's on the roadmap to set up person-to-person relationships. Am I misspeaking there, Kathy?
No, you aren't, and you did just fine, so I don't really need to say anything.
Excellent.
Yeah, and something on my to-do list this week is to put together, based on some feedback that we've gotten from our community here, when do we need and what's possible with sharing with an individual, and whether or not that individual would need to have two-factor authentication, and when do we share with an advisor role. And so I would hope over the next month we're going to have some more clarity around that, but I realize that each university is going to need to be able to flex that, and I would even assume that the University of Washington, over the next couple of years, whatever decision we make this year is probably going to change in 6 months to a year, just guessing.
Yeah, because I would assume at most institutions the relationship between a student and their advisor, it's not a homogeneous relationship, right? It depends on where you go in the university, how they manage, like, oh, psychology, they advise anybody who walks in, or, oh, I get A through F and you get, G. So I imagine there's just so many different models of how that relationship exists that we look forward to your work handling that.
Right.
So can I ask one follow-up question really quick about that slide? Another thing that's in scope is the degree audit.
Yes.
I can't remember exactly how it's phrased on the slide, but I noticed on your MyPlan website, on your February 13th update, you said that you're moving a milestone for audit a plan to allow time to address anticipated complexity with the U-Achieve API.
Yes.
We're really interested in the integration with DARS, and I believe UW has DARS as well, right? So you said we've found numerous bugs already and are working on those fixes with the vendor. Could you talk a little bit about what kind of bugs you found?
Sure. I am not a U-Achieve expert, but I know that we came up with about 7 bugs, and of those 7 bugs, I think there were 2 that were shared by other institutions. When I was talking to, I guess his name is Dale Peters at College Source, and he was saying that each university will configure the requirements uniquely, and so by doing that, uncover particular bugs. But we really we're moving to where we're trying to release U-Achieve 4.0. We're not trying to, we're on a mission to release U-Achieve 4.0 here as soon as possible, and we are building the MyPlan functionality on that version. So there were 7 bugs. When we spoke earlier this week, or last week actually, I'm sorry, I think there were 3 that he thought were fixed already, and then the other 4 2 of them had test cases, 2 of them didn't. So they're in different places, but we're doing what we can to try to test those before the 4.0.16 release comes out. That's the magic release. All I know is the 16. So unfortunately, I can't speak to the specifics of those. But if you want to touch base on those, I can definitely get you more information.
That'd be super.
Yeah.
Okay,
Coach Deacon has that.
Awesome. I'll follow up through Tim Heidinger here at Berkeley. Thanks.
Great. Sure. Yeah, but we're pretty excited so far. The proof of concepts that we've done on the back-end architecture with integrating with U-Achieve so far are proving really successful. And really what's happening is those bugs are bringing the requirements through in a way that we wouldn't expect. Like an OR would appear somewhere we wouldn't want that to show. And so they're not preventing us from being able to move forward with development. But I'm glad you found our website. And I just try to make any of the updates that go to the sponsors transparent for everybody. So you're seeing what my bosses see for project updates. And then I've kind of talked already about what we're doing in different phases. So I'll just kind of mention this briefly and let you guys have, enter with questions as you will. But essentially the stripe here are things that we're doing along the way. Some things like usability testing. Once a month we do usability testing. And next Tuesday we're planning on trying a new approach where we just essentially tackle students real time and get their feedback on the readability of the audit. But we're still working on global navigation and the visual design, and I bring that up because as I take you to the demo, you're going to see some pretty wireframe-like looking gray interface. And that's largely because I'm waiting on KRAD to fix a piece with how their divs are set up, and we're hoping to have that here pretty soon, and then we'll come back and do the visual elements. And then data migration is huge. I mean, the amount of work that we're doing here with getting things set up in curriculum management, and I don't know, I think we're potentially even touching some services and enrollment. This is where I get out of my expertise area. But the data migration effort is huge. Yeah. Yeah.
Not that you are getting out of your area of expertise.
You are getting into
enrollment services.
Kamal draws these. That was awesome. Draws these diagrams for me, and I understand them with great clarity for at least a week after I've seen them.
So most of you know Kamal, who is on the services team with Kuali Student for many years. He's the dev lead on this project, so he's intimately familiar with our services and our architectural stack, and it's in good hands there.
Great. Okay, so that's kind of the intro to MyPlan, and then I was thinking to just take you into a demo of what we've done so far.
Can I ask a quick question?
Absolutely.
Your data migration, your overall strategy, are you replicating data from your legacy system and, again, housing it in these new data structures, or is it becoming the new repository for the data?
So we are, I can tell you a couple of things, and then hopefully Carol or Bob can jump in where I'm wrong here. But a large amount of our effort is mapping the data from its current location and mapping that to curriculum management. And so we're going through this process where we need to make quite a few decisions about the data structure so that we can do what they're calling the bootstrap process for, what are our academic time periods and what are our grading options. And so essentially kind of the...
Well, you're going through the services, but aren't you hitting production data?
We will be.
Okay, so right now you're in a test environment, but it's basically reading, it's just mapping. I mean, that's the beauty of service-oriented architecture, right, is we're integrating with the legacy system, so we're hitting, eventually we will just be hitting our current legacy system mapped through the services, going through the services.
But when we're ready to deploy, we will be hitting production data, and any of the web services that we're hitting that are UW-specific will have a middle layer that's Kuali student-specific, that then part of the contribution effort for another university would be to map that middle layer to their own web services or database or whatever that may be. Does that?
Yeah, so we're going through the service contracts for curriculum, and that's why we spent all this time. It's not we, it's you guys. I haven't done any. I've had no part of this, but you have been mapping our current legacy data against the services, so we can go through the services and go right against our legacy data ultimately. But yeah, now you're using a development data set, I would assume, but you're not redoing the data structures or what they currently are. I mean, they are what they are, right? It's just they are the way they are in our production system. So we're not actually doing any kind of redesign of our data.
So just to understand what you're talking about when you say data, you mean you're mapping like your course information, all your program requirements, like the degree program requirements and the rules associated with that? Is that what you're talking about?
So the program requirements and the rules and so on, well, the majority of those are coming from the UAchieve API. And so behind the scenes, UAchieve is gathering the academic record of a student and then is taking all of those rules and then gives us an output of what the audit would then end up being. But then when we run prerequisite rules, we're actually getting those rules from a UW-specific database. And then there's some architecture in between MyPlan and that I'm not.
So I think I can help a little bit. Primarily the data is around data attributes for courses, and then there is the prereq data. I don't know if you've seen our white paper on integrating rules from curriculum management with STARS, and it became pretty clear that you can't do it. So so for the terms of program audit, DARS will be the source of record for those audit requirements. But we are hitting curriculum management for some of the prereq rules.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I think the idea is that curriculum management won't be used for course eligibility or graduation eligibility, but it would be for the course level rules, like requisite, co-requisite, ad code required, or some things like at that level.